Good morning, everyone. My name is Lisa Carriagalo. I'm the Assistant Provost for Faculty Development and Diversity. And along with Judy and our other colleague, Assistant Provost for Faculty Appointments, Amy Brand back there, we'd like to welcome you to Harvard as well as to Loeb House, which was once upon a time the house of our Harvard presidents. It was built in 1921 and by a gift from then President Lowell, and was the house of our Harvard presidents up through 1971, at which point it became the home of our Office of Governing Boards, our corporation members, and our overseers. So we welcome you to this place. This is actually where the overseers and the Board of Overseers and the corporation meet on a regular basis each year. So we're delighted that you are here. We have a few housekeeping notes before we start with our first panel. First of all, we do have our wonderful photographer, Susie Camarada, who came all the way up from North Carolina to take your photos. A number of you actually sent us photos, but we would love it if you would, if you're willing, during the breaks. There's a 9:50 to 10 break, as well as a 10:50 to 11 a.m. break. If you would like to take an individual shot, she will be delighted to take your photo. And we would love to include your photo as well as your bio profile on our website, the Faculty Development and Diversity website, so please do that. And secondly, we have given you a packet of a wide variety of information related to some of the programs that we sponsor in our office, but I also wanted to point out, as you know, and you probably heard already, we are celebrating this year our 375th anniversary. And we have a very exciting set of activities during the year, but in particular on October 14th, we are hosting a very special faculty reception from 5 to 7 p.m. over on the Faculty Club. I know that the schools have also planned a wide variety of activities for you, but as you make your way to the big celebration in the yard, please do come and join us for a really fun time at the Faculty Club if you haven't already been there for some additional celebrations. In the meantime, I hope that you will not hesitate to call on us via email or by phone or drop by on the 8th floor of the Holyoke Center if you have any questions at all as you begin your life here at Harvard. So that said, we are going to start with our first panel, which are our panelists of recently promoted associate professors. We have found in the past that we, and have heard from new faculty that it has been useful for them to hear from not just our tenured faculty, but really our associate professors who are really in the trenches developing their work and just a little closer to, and are mindful of, having sat in your same seat just a few years earlier. So we are delighted today to have three truly outstanding faculty members join us from across the university, and I will briefly introduce them, and they will make some initial remarks, and then I hope that you will ask them lots of questions. We will be filming the initial part of the panel, the remarks from our panelists, but we will shut off the camera for the question and answer period, so I hope you won't be shy in asking them questions. We are in a closed room, and any questions that you ask, we will certainly listen to intently, but what is said in this room stays in this room unless you choose to do otherwise. So that said, our panelists today will start from my far right, Meira Levinson. Meira is Associate Professor at the Harvard Graduate School of Education. She is a normative political philosopher who writes about civic education, multiculturalism, and youth empowerment. In doing so, she draws upon scholarship from multiple disciplines, as well as her 8 years of experience teaching in the Atlanta and Boston public schools. Her latest book, No Citizen Left Behind by Harvard Press, argues that the United States suffers from a civic empowerment gap that is as shameful and anti-democratic as the academic achievement gap targeted by No Child Left Behind. Meira received her D.Phil in politics from Newfield College, University of Oxford, England. Next to her is Edo Berger. Dr. Berger is Associate Professor of Astronomy and the John Loeb Associate Professor of the Natural Sciences at Harvard University. Edo's research is focused on the study of gamma ray bursts, optical transients, and magnetic fields in low-mass stars and brown dwarfs, which he'll tell you more about, I'm sure. He uses observations across the electromagnetic spectrum, from radio to X-ray, gamma rays. Dr. Berger was a joint Hubble and Carnegie Princeton Prize postdoctoral fellow at Princeton University and the Carnegie Observatories. He received his PhD in astrophysics from Caltech in 2004 with a thesis focused on multi-wavelength studies of gamma ray bursts, their host galaxies, and type IBC core collapse supernovae. And last but not least, Dr. Mukti Khaire is associate professor at the Harvard Business School. She teaches an elective course on entrepreneurship in creative industries that examines the relationship between business and culture. She has previously taught the required first-year MBA course, The Entrepreneurial Manager, which we could all use. She has also taught in the HBS executive education programs, including custom executive education offerings, the pre-MBA, and START. She currently serves as the faculty chair of the school's 2+2 initiative. Dr. Khaire's research interests lie at the intersection of entrepreneurship, culture, and creative industries. Dr. Khaire received her PhD in management from Columbia Business School. We'll start first, I believe, with Dr. Levinson. And in the interest of filming, I believe that they wanted you to come up and make your remarks, if that's okay.
Oh, I see. Okay. That's not my style usually. All right. Pontificate. All right. So I'm really grateful to Judy and her team for inviting me to be here. I confess, I was saying to Mukti earlier, I really have had a hard time figuring out what to say for this because, in part because I think, as Judy said, every Harvard school is really so different. And each of us is quite unique in whatever path we took to get here. And so I really don't know, I don't think that I have anything necessarily generalizable to say. And so instead what I will do is recount some things that I think have been useful to me, especially in retrospect. And again, I think it's entirely up to you how useful you find them. I should say also my perspective on being at Harvard is probably somewhat different than at least my colleagues. It's kind of astonishing, actually, that I got the job here in the first place, because when I was interviewing for it, I went and sat on Judy's couch at that point. Her office was still in the ed school, and I told her quite confidently that the reason I wanted to become a Harvard professor was because I thought it would be an easier job than being a public school teacher. And when I went home, my husband, who teaches at the School of Public Health, said, "Meira, do you want this job or do you not?" Because I was recounting to him sort of, oh, yes, I had this conversation with Judy and that conversation with other people. Said, "What on earth were you thinking?" But I kind of have this Panglossian perspective that teaching at Harvard is just fun, and it's incredibly cushy. So I got my doctorate in political theory, and then I became a public school teacher for about a decade. And in comparison, this is a really, really nice life. My first year here, I actually got my faculty assistant to order me all sorts of office supplies because I was used to being in a place where usually we had to, shell out our own money. And so you would just grab what you could from the school room before everything got shut down. You had to start buying your own copy paper. And I still have, it was only about a year into it that I realized, I don't have to hoard dry erase markers. They'll buy me more. And then, of course, the financial collapse happened, and they stopped buying us dry erase markers, at least at the ed school. But it has taken me some adjustment. This is now my 5th year, to sort of understand what it means to be in a place as still wealthy as Harvard is. And I think that that's one of the sort of main messages that I have, is to appreciate where you are. We, even under the new financial constraints, which hopefully will be alleviated by the new massive capital campaign, we are just sort of, frankly, working in the lap of luxury. And I think it's really important to remember that and to appreciate that and then to do something with it. And I think one of the things that we have been charged as faculty members here to do with it is to be responsible and to do good work. and to realize that everybody wants us to do good work. And rather than stressing out about how hard it is to get one's work done, about all the expectations, about what's going on, think that we really have been given a gift. We've been given a gift to work with extraordinary students, really fascinating colleagues who are actually interesting to talk to about their own work and about life in general and about what's going on with Obama and everything else. In an incredibly rich array of resources, of libraries, of assistants, of research assistants, of archives, of labs, of everything. And I think that if we can launch ourselves in and make use of that, we will be doing ourselves some good, and Harvard some good. We will be teaching better, doing better research, and doing the world some good. I mean, basically, Harvard is an immense lever of power. This is one of the things, I frankly, this is the other way in which probably this isn't the best career move, but I've been very open about my ambivalence about being here. So I was most recently in the Boston Public Schools, and it's hard for me sometimes to sort of take seriously the idea of being coddled in an environment like this and being given, say, a teaching fellow for every 20 students I teach, when normally I was, say, teaching 150 students a day, and certainly had no teaching fellows at my beck and call to help me with copying or grading or anything. But one of the reasons that I love being here is because we get the opportunity, for no good reason except that we're at Harvard, to collaborate with people, to take leadership positions, to be called by the media, to set agendas, to be listened to in ways that we just I think are untrue for any other university really in the world. And I would say embrace those opportunities, not so that you don't get research done. That's one thing I'm about to go on to, sort of some pitfalls I think to avoid. But this is one of the real opportunities of being here, is that people will listen to you. And that has tremendous intellectual power, political power, cultural power, pedagogical power. And I do think that's a real gift. And so I think if the more that we can lift ourselves out of the day-to-day trenches and the day-to-day stressors and remind ourselves that for however long we are here, we have been given the gift of support, of resources, of amazing students and amazing colleagues. That will just make our time here more pleasant and more productive, and I think also help us be responsible to in some way giving back for what we've been given here. When my husband was hired here, he teaches at the School of Public Health, and he was told at the moment of his hiring, well, everybody at Harvard gets tenure, they just don't all get tenure at Harvard, which was actually a really useful reminder, and it's one that he did get tenure. It's one that I keep in mind now, in part. I just feel like Harvard is a wonderful place, and it's also one university out of many. And if we use the resources that we have here effectively, in fact, all of us will do just fine somewhere, whether or not that we do just fine here. And I think that's the other thing, therefore, is really there's no reason to sacrifice everything for the sake of here. This is a really wacko place. I mean, it's not so much of it is out of our control. This weird ad hoc committee that just doesn't exist. And I didn't even realize it didn't exist at Yale. I thought at least Yale and Harvard were tantamount, but not even Yale has an ad hoc. And so, we live in a place where fundamentally our ultimate outcomes are just in the hands of somebody else. And I don't think it really matters what we do in that respect. And I think that therefore some measure of fatalism is, well, then be true to yourself and do what you care about. And if you can't, since we cannot fully be in charge of our own careers here, be in charge of our lives to do good work at the time and to know that we will have the opportunity to do work, in fact, for the rest of our careers, whether or not we happen to do it in the heart of Cambridge, Massachusetts. So that, I think, is a sort of fundamental attitude that I would encourage us all to have about this place. I also have the impression that it's probably a fairly successful attitude. In this case, what Alan was saying made a lot of sense to me. I think that the more we are passionate about what we do and do it for the sake of doing it and doing it well and because we care about it, the more likely we are to do good work. And therefore, the more likely we are, in fact, to get the traditional markers of success, say promotion, than if we are constantly trying to engineer our work in order to fit others' expectations. My sense is that, we were sort of talking about ourselves as the warm-up crew, because I have no clue what it takes to get tenure at Harvard. I haven't gotten tenure at Harvard. And ultimately, I'm not sure that getting to the associate professor is really, a particularly meaningful marker. But one of the things that I keep in mind, along with the fact that I could probably get tenure, I'm sure I can get tenure at many fine universities at this point, in part thanks to the support that I've gotten here, is that there are also lots of other things I'd be happy to do, in fact, being a middle school principal. And with that in mind, it's therefore given me the freedom to just write what I want to write and to do what I want to do, to meet the people I want to meet. And I think, therefore, I do interesting work because I'm not trying to fit myself into some particular mold. So I would say, sort of stay true to yourself. A couple of final things. When I first came to the ed school, it was stunning to me how many people talked about the entrepreneurial nature of Harvard. And I've really come to understand what people mean. It is an extraordinarily individualistic place that can, I think, be experienced as a sink or swim kind of place in the way that Pat Graham responded to Judy, oh, you'll figure it out. But also, it is a place that rewards entrepreneurship. And so as I look back, say, at the 4 years that I've spent thus far at the ed school, there are a bunch of things that in retrospect seem quite strategic. At the time, they were simply my attempt to do something interesting. But they've all basically been responsive to entrepreneurship on my part. So for example, when I first got to the ed school, I knew that I had a lot of colleagues who were interested in the same kinds of issues as I was, in civic and moral education. But the ed school seemed to be a very individualistic place. People didn't show up for lunch in places. There wasn't really a way to have a conversation. And so I sent out an email to colleagues saying, if you're interested in these issues, let's get together and talk about them. And we ended up creating an initiative at the ed school that's now fairly public. We've been invited by outside foundation to get a field building grant and so forth. And it looks very good. Really, it was a way where I could have some conversations with colleagues. I really wanted to figure out how to have lunches with people and have some seminars going on. But it was also amazing that basically, if you have energy, people will respond. And that was a salutary lesson. And sort of every time that I've had energy to do something, people have responded, and life has felt a little better, and the institution has felt even more, accommodating. At the same time, I think it's really important to say no. So be entrepreneurial about things that you care about and want to do. And then also, this was advice given to me by Howard Gardner, a colleague at the ed school. He said, things will come to you now all the time. Again, I think basically for undeserved reasons, because I am the same scholar even as I was when I was teaching the Boston Public Schools, but now I'm at Harvard, and so now I'm quite important and expert. And so it's true, opportunities come raining down, right? To be on boards, on commissions, to opine about this, to commit to do book chapters about that, edit this other thing. And I think it's really, really important to learn how to say no to most of those things, and to realize that ultimately it's not all of these bitty things that one does, but it's really the corpus of work that one produces. At the same time, there have been a couple things that I've said yes to that I think that whether or not intellectually they were the most interesting at the time, I think they were worthwhile because I got to meet people and I sort of became part of a community. And that includes things at the university. It's very, very hard to meet people across the university. And you're in ways almost discouraged from it. I was on leave last fall. And I won't mention her name, to a colleague in the government department when I saw her, of course, at the American Political Science Association conference, because one doesn't meet actually at Harvard itself. And I said to her, oh, I'm hoping to come to the political theory workshops because I've been intending to do that now for 3 years, and I haven't done it. And she said, you're on leave. Why would you waste your time doing that? And in fact, she was right, because I discovered, being on leave, that the worst thing you can do is break it up with lots of things. The whole point is to have big chunks of time actually to think, where you don't have a meeting to go to, you don't have a student to talk to, whatever. But I still haven't made it to a political theory workshop, and I'm now in my 5th year here. And whereas things like this or other, I don't know, I was on a couple of university committees, they actually do pull you in, and you get to meet people and hear interesting ideas. And the last thing I'll say is that one way that I actually have been able to meet people, which was, again, looks very strategic, but only totally in retrospect, is that I have this new project on justice in schools where I wanted to pull in an interdisciplinary mix of graduate students to work on it with me. And so I sent this sort of call for students, which was 2 or 3 pages, out to a bunch of colleagues across the university, mostly senior because they were the ones I sort of know of, saying, can you spread this around? And it's interesting because I then got to meet colleagues whom I hadn't met, who had skimmed the 2 pages, and then I had breakfast with people, lunches with people, and now I am actually more known around the university, totally unintentionally. But that's the kind of thing, I think, when you have something interesting that you're doing, send it around to people, and I think that it may turn out to have salutary outcomes. And that's my kind of random list of my thinking from being here. I'll pass it on.
Okay, so I have to say I feel inspired now. Okay, so yeah, I wanted to thank Judy and her office for organizing this event and giving me the opportunity to share some thoughts with you. Since Meira gave such a kind of inspiring overall idea of what things are like, I thought maybe I will focus a little bit more on some nitty-gritty and kind of give you, partly from my experience and looking at other people in my department and other people around, kind of an idea of at least what I think are important issues to pursue as you develop as a scholar, which is the theme of this meeting. So I'll start first by saying that for me, the term scholar means 3 things. It doesn't just mean research, which is an important part of it, but it also means being an educator and then being a citizen of the university. And all of those things together actually will allow you to develop as a scholar and to meet people around you in your department and across the university. So I will say that first and foremost in this development within the university and externally is to talk about your work, advertise your work, tell people what you do. And that means even within your department, you might think that at some point you went through and you interviewed for your job, and so everybody remembers exactly what you're working on, but it's actually not true. People do not necessarily keep track of what you do on a day-to-day basis. You've written a book, you've made some important discovery, even then people might not be aware of it. And so within the structure of your department, for example, give a seminar, give a talk, kind of push things a little bit so that people are really aware of what you're doing. At the end of the day, your colleagues are also going to sit on the initial stage of your tenure process, and if they don't have a good sense of what you're working on, you're already starting at a difficult position. That, I think, then carries through the wider university community. And so the important thing is to go to events like this, for example, and Judy and her office organize a lot of other events that are exciting. Last year we learned how to make sushi. And that was a blast. And, there was a chance to just sit at the table next to somebody you've never met before and while, making sushi rolls, talk about what you're actually doing. I think it's important for 2 reasons. One, people get to know you and what you do. The other thing is it gives you an opportunity to talk to an audience that is a little bit different from your colleagues, right? Less technically aware of your field, and that's always good to kind of try to explain yourself to an audience of non-experts. And that also involves serving on university committees. And part of the advice I got when I came here was, you got 7 or 8 years for your tenure, focus on your research, focus on teaching, avoid any committee work at all costs. And I think that's actually a huge mistake. and partly for the reasons that Meira already mentioned, which is it's a way of meeting people. And in such a big university, there's really no better way. And so I spent 1 year on the FAS Faculty Council, which was extremely educational, both in terms of meeting people, but also seeing how things happen on the inside, how the sausage gets made. And then finally, and of course, a critical part of being a scholar is advertising yourself externally. And that means going to give talks at other universities. That's obvious. Serving on committees that are external to the university, again, for the same reason. It gives you an opportunity to meet people, to find out what's going on in the world around you. And I find that in terms of one kind of specific piece of advice, maybe every department is different, but I found that one great way of doing that is actually serving on your department's colloquium committee or talk committee or whatever committee you have internally. Because even though you're inviting somebody on behalf of the department or maybe the university, they get that invitation personally from you. And so I found that once you start inviting people, they start inviting you. And so that's a great way of kind of going out there and presenting your work. The other critical aspect of this, I think, is working with students. And students both at the undergraduate level and the graduate level. And the students here are fantastic. And the undergraduate students are extremely talented. They're very open. They're, my impression coming here was that the students are going to be a little bit weird. That's what I was used to from Caltech. And I was astonished that it's actually exactly the opposite. The students are easy to talk to. They're very eager to learn. They're very eager to participate in actual research, in what the scholars in their department actually do. And I think working with students is important for kind of three reasons. One is it actually gives you perspective on your own work. Because when you have to talk to a graduate and say, you should come work with my research group, come work in my lab, this is what we do, you actually have to explain what you're doing, right? And you have to do it in a way that will be convincing if you want to draw them in, or maybe the opposite if you're trying to push them away. But it does give you perspective on your own work, on what you do, because you have to explain it to somebody else who's not an expert. Of course, in principle, it increases your productivity, and maybe not in the short term, and you should never view working with students on a kind of short-term, 1 semester, 1 year, because it's a kind of long-term process, but it does increase your productivity, and most importantly, it allows you to explore new areas where you might not have time to really devote your entire time and energy to exploring some new topic that you wanted to think about. But if you mentor a student who's very active, who's very proactive, you can actually use that to broaden your horizons in terms of your research. Okay, and finally, in terms of university involvement, I would say, go to faculty meetings, go to all of these, faculty meetings within the department. FAS faculty meetings, for those of you who are in FAS, are, I think, very interesting to go to. And actually, there are important decisions being made that are very easy to ignore, especially as young faculty, because they might not impact you in the short term. But there are decisions being made that will impact you on a time scale of, maybe 10 or 20 years. And so it's good to be part of that process, exercise your right to vote, et cetera. In terms of committees, again, I would say don't avoid committee work, but volunteer for the things you really like in advance before you get assigned to things you don't like. And so, when I showed up at the astronomy department, I had a list of things I really cared about, mainly having to do with graduate students. And so, I volunteered to serve on the admissions committee. I volunteered to serve on our committee on academic studies, which monitors the progress of all the graduate students. And I avoided serving as a result, on things that I cared less about. So I think that's useful. And the other thing that I discovered this year, which is a lot of fun, is freshman advising, which is kind of a big responsibility, I think, and I was terrified initially. This is my first year being a freshman advisor. But it's a lot of fun. You get to meet students, when they take their first footsteps into Harvard, and kind of help to guide them along the way. And that, again, gives you, I think, a whole new perspective on what it's like being part of this community. Let me see if I left anything else. Oh, again, echoing what people have already said, this is a very big organization. It's not trivial to meet people. And I experienced that personally in my department, which is a relatively small department, only 20 faculty, but we're embedded within the Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics, which has about 300 astronomers. And so, it's a huge organization. And it's very easy and sometimes very tempting to just sit in your office, work on what you do, maybe talk to your graduate students and your undergrads and your research assistants, but kind of have a very limited horizon around you. But you have to resist that temptation. You're gonna lose some time in terms of what might seem like effectiveness and productivity, but you're really gonna make connections that you might not expect. And that will, again, generate, I think, new research, new ideas, new opportunities. So, devote a certain amount of time from your busy schedules to really actively pursuing those connections, and don't wait for people to come to you. Other people are busy as well, so, go out and do it yourself. And that's mainly what I wanted to say. Thanks.
So I'm wondering if I can get away with saying everything that I wanted to say has been said, so I can, let's get to questions straight away. But probably not. I could, most of what I wanted to say has been said, but I probably couldn't get away with saying that and walking away from here. I feel like, so I teach entrepreneurship, as you heard earlier. I feel like being in one of my classes where, most of the times you find that entrepreneurs do things because do certain things that are because they're short on money, short on time. Nobody wants to work for them because they're so, they have no reputation, et cetera, et cetera. But all of these things, putting this sort of, bubblegum and shoestring package together, when they come to class as part of the sort of case that we're teaching, most of the students and faculty end up sort of post hoc rationalizing and saying what a wonderful and strategic thing it was that they did, that bubblegum and shoestring. And I feel like what I'm going to say is going to sound like that, where I sort of sit back, and when I was making notes, I was thinking, what would I say that would, and I don't think I sort of planned any of the things that I'm about to say. And I have really a very sort of tactical list of things that I'm going to talk about. I don't think I planned any of it, but it seems to have happened organically and seem to have worked so far. So take what I say with that in mind, that some of it might be post hoc rationalizing, but it was fun while I did it, and it worked out. So at least so far, and so I have first I sort of started off when I was making notes for what to talk about. I started sort of thinking, is there anything different about Harvard? Because there was the question sort of was, how would you succeed as a scholar at here or at Harvard? And there's good news and bad news. It's sort of yes and no. So the good news part is that no, there isn't anything different about Harvard, because there is the same evaluation process that you would have in any other university. The bar is high, and what you would be evaluated for is the same across universities. And in the good news part of that is that you do have more resources, as we've talked about earlier, and a ton of them. And so even if but the bad news part of it is that there are also more distractions and demands on your time. So the distractions, just to quickly go through, I could go to a seminar, this is to your point earlier, I could go to a seminar every day of the week between Harvard, between my unit, other units in the business school, other departments, sociology or other FAS departments here at the university, departments at MIT and Sloan, BU, BC, the list is endless. So there's a lot of distraction, and in the first year, I did make the mistake of sort of saying, ooh, there's so much here, let me go check everything out. You do soon figure out there are some places that don't really go in the direction or in the area that you're interested in, et cetera, and you figure this out, but so keep that in mind, I guess, in the first year when you think of this. In terms of demands, I think it goes back also to the fact it's a plus and a minus. We have great students here, and especially at the business school, and especially because I'm in the entrepreneurship unit, I get a lot of students who have ideas for new businesses wanting to talk to me, and it's very tempting to talk to every student because they are fun ideas. These are smart students. And I'm sure something of this sort, it's not business ideas, but something of this sort happens in every unit when you have smart, enthusiastic students. Again, I think I'm saying things that have been said before, and I'm just echoing it. I learned to say no. It was harder to say no to students. It's much easier to say no to a bunch of service-related or committee kind of things. It's harder to say no to students, and I sort of try to minimize saying no to students, by trying to say no to other service commitments. So yes, I mean, I think the sort of the same evaluation, higher bar, but good, more resources. Maybe some in my case at the business school compared to other business schools, we get more time to spend on research here because we teach on only one term of the year. I don't know how that works across other parts of the university, but you might have more time and more resources, which is a great combination to have. Given that, given all of this, what did I sort of, again, post-hoc rationalized as having worked for me? What did I do? I think, again, echoing what most people said already, really I kept in mind, again, learned after stumbling in the first year maybe, kept in mind that my audience is both within the department and university as well as outside, because ultimately you want to be known as a scholar in the broader universe of scholars, not just within Harvard. And so that was important. It was also important for me to, again, remember and ensure that the network that I have be inside the department and university, department, school, university, and outside. And that's those are tied, but by network, I would sort of say collaborators, co-authors. That was important for the sort of same reason that most schools won't hire their own PhD students because they want to encourage cross-fertilization of ideas. It's really useful to build ties across other universities because there are always people doing very interesting things outside, and if you can work with them, there's better work gets done. I think echoing what everybody has said again before, one of the things I've seen is that I have to often tell students who are not doing so well in class, to boost their confidence, I end up telling them, listen, you're not an admissions mistake. You can do it. It's not like you came here by chance. You are smart. So just do X and this will work. And I found myself thinking, why don't we ever think of that for ourselves? We're not recruiting mistakes. We didn't just slip through because somebody forgot, or didn't realize that, oh my goodness, we're actually hiring this person. We are here because we are smart, accomplished, intelligent, hardworking, all of that good stuff. And so find and define what interests us, and we need to do work on that. And I think that leads to the best possible outcome in the sense that whether you get tenure here or not, you will get tenure somewhere, and you will have enjoyed the journey. And I think that's so not a recruiting mistake, not a very nice way to put it, but kind of true. And so that's I think just I had confidence in the fact that I was doing interesting work and that I wanted to do it, and I felt like it was important. And so, even if once in a while you heard or saw the arched eyebrow, but what is this and why are you doing it? I would say push and do it as long as like your basic scholars and researchers' instinct says it's right and important and interesting. I think the other really useful thing that I learned was to take people at their word when they offer help. they can't wriggle out of it then because they've sort of said, oh, let me know if you ever want me to read anything of yours or if I can help you in any way. Immediately take them up on that. No, because because it's hard. It's hard because we all can see how busy everybody is around us, and we always feel, especially when we're new to the place, we always feel we don't want to impose on people by giving them stuff to read. If someone offers, give it to them. What's the worst that'll happen? They won't get the time to read it, but at least you will have given it. You will have done your job of making sure that your work, to Edo's point, is percolating. It's there somewhere, and that I found was really helpful. What else? Just in terms of what I did to ensure a network outside and an audience outside, just, this is going to sound really banal, but it took me a while to realize that it's important to do that, which is to go to all the main conferences in the field, but also figure out that there's always smaller conferences that are more focused and more related to your work, and to go to those as well so that you build both sort of identities, the broad and the narrow, not narrow focused. And the same thing, except in the case of a conflict of interest. If I was asked to review an article for a journal that I was interested in publishing in or hope to publish in, I always said yes. It was crazy. There were months when I would have 6 or 7 papers to review, but it's your way of establishing that you're a scholar with merit and of getting to know people and getting people to know you. It's the same with working with graduate students, both inside and outside the university, serving on PhD committees. Never missed an opportunity to present my work to diverse people. So not just within my unit or not just always places that invited me, but sort of volunteered to present at random places where you might not think. So we have alumni reunions where faculty are asked if they want to present, and I would do it. I've done it 2 or 3 times in the 5 years that I've been here, and it's just fun. You get to know. You get a different perspective. It sharpens your work. It definitely makes you think differently about it. And so that definitely helped. And this was both for getting feedback as well as just to be out there. Again, build an audience, build a network. I will give a caveat here, though, and just because I would hope that people learn from my mistakes, be very careful about what stage of work you ask for feedback on. It should be at least somewhere middlingly developed. I don't think that's a word, but except I figure I'm being recorded. But anyway, very early work, it's not helpful to send that out for feedback or comments or advice because that's what sticks in people's minds, that this was sort of underdeveloped and not very good. I would strongly urge you to sort of develop it to a certain point and then send it out. And then I think just finally, I kept trying. Even though I was picking topics that I found interesting and found important, I would try and see if there was some way to make that more relevant and more useful to the department or to the school's goals. So was there some way of making this work be meaningful beyond just this being my work? The elective course that I'm going to offer comes straight out of my interest and my work, and I think it's a sort of niche course that there isn't another course in that area in the school. That's always nice to be able to do that. And so I'm not saying, and so I want to be very clear here, I'm not saying that we should mold our research to fit and serve the department or the university or the school's goals, but to figure out ways by which the research that we are interested in doing does become more relevant and more useful to the school. I think it becomes a form of service, but it also, as a scholar, I think again what you get is a broader perspective on the work that you're doing. Learn to say no. I think that's been said, and learn to let go. I think one of the things that I came in sort of OCD about travel arrangements, managing my calendar. I didn't want anybody to. At some point, there are these minor things that if you have the ability to give that away to somebody else to do, it's way better for your peace of mind. So I think that was really important to learn to let go. It's hard. I think many of us, as we go through graduate school, learn to become controlling and very obsessed about details, but there are some details that are not worth obsessing about. And then just in terms of, I know a lot of us have talked about the resources that we have, and I spoke about that as a huge plus of being here. The databases, data sets, archives, the libraries, all of these, I'm sure you know, I'm sure what I know about the libraries is not applicable to many of you here, because I'll probably look at a different aspect of the data sets. But apart from that, I have a very simple way of figuring out how to make the most of the resources that we have here. Just ask. Literally, just ask somebody. That even if that person doesn't know, they will think of somebody that can tell you, they'll think of somebody that can tell you, and you will find, ask and you shall find. It literally works out here. It's the same thing for taking advantage of fellowships and leaves and other things that might be available. Just ask and figure it out. There is absolutely no harm in asking. And then just finally, I think one main resource that I would strongly urge all of you in the few years that you coming to not ignore is the Health and Wellness Center at Holyoke. They have the best massages for just $40. And you will find that will be really, really important and helpful, especially after spending many hours hunched over a computer or your lab equipment or whatever it is. That's a very important resource, and I would strongly, strongly urge you to look into that. Thank you.